This is Sports Bettor Court with Dan Lust on Bettor Sports Network.
Welcome to another episode of the Sports Bettor Court. I am your host, your arbitrator, your dispute resolution dude. It is Dan Lust. So we are here talking sports betting, talking sports law. As we do each and every week, we take you around the sports betting and sports law landscape to kind of figure out what legal issues arise. So as you guys know, I am from the great state of New York. We are dealing with the U.S. Open this week and maybe some interesting comments that maybe not many people have heard of. So Danil Medvedev, the number 3 ranked player in the world, made a very, let's say, interesting admission that certainly is in our sports law world. Danil Medvedev, who was just coming off his win, he is now advancing, and I think he's playing Alcaraz, but we shall see. The quote that I want to focus on today is going to be in the world of sports piracy. It's a quote from Danil Medvedev, something you don't normally hear human beings say, let alone professional athletes. Quote, "I guess in a lot of hotels they have Spectrum, so I cannot watch it on TV anymore. I don't know if it's legal or illegal, but I have to find a way because I cannot watch it on TV. So I got the internet and probably pirate websites or something, and I watched tennis there. I have no other choice." So there you have it. Danil Medvedev is admitting in front of a room of reporters that he is committing piracy, that he is streaming tennis illegally because he has to. News alert to Danil Medvedev: just because you are a tennis player doesn't mean you are immune to federal piracy laws. So just so people know, and I imagine there's a lot of people that do it, according to a study last year from the UK's Intellectual Property Office, 3.9 million people illegally stream live sports in 2022. The actual business of illegal streaming, I guess, results, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, in a loss of $29.2 billion in revenue each year, because of digital privacy. So there's a huge industry of this kind of illegal streaming, yet everybody seems to do it. That said, right, for Danil Medvedev's purposes, everyone is watching tennis. Everyone's talking about tennis, but they're not necessarily watching it through proper streams. Last year, right, we're just talking about pro and college football, the most important, right, of all of our kind of rights, at least television and live sports rights. 87 of the 100 most watched TV broadcasts of 2022 were football games, either pro or college sports. So you have this robust streaming audience, right? $29.2 billion of lost revenue, according to that market. You have 4 million people at least admitting they watched live sports illegally. And then you have Danil Medvedev very publicly saying it on a platform. So I thought this was a pretty good time to talk about what is and what's not allowed for, even if you're a professional athlete. There's really 3 levels of streaming, right? Or 3 levels of piracy that you should be looking out for. In terms of penalties, again, I'm not going to tell you, I'm not your lawyer. I'm just kind of telling you to be aware of these type of laws in our country. There's illegally streaming something, right? Then there's illegally downloading, which is a much more, we'll say, serious offense, coming with larger fines and potential imprisonment. And then there's the most serious one, hosting an illegal stream. You can look around the country. There's been criminal prosecutions for hosting. So it looks like people and prosecutors want to go after the hosters, then they want to go after the downloaders, and then the streamers. Just because the streamers are third in line doesn't mean that they are not in trouble. It just means that the penalties are not as harsh. But when I'm saying not as harsh, these could come with $10,000 fines, potentially misdemeanors. So yes, maybe not a felony, which comes with over a year in prison, but a misdemeanor could be up to a year in prison. So yes, Danil Medvedev, I guess, thinks he's getting away with it because I don't know who's going to punish him, but I could see someone making an example out of him pretty quickly. As we're on the verge of football season, I think it's important to know when you watch those streams for NFL, again, not everybody's streaming tennis illegally, but I imagine just for the nature of football, we talked about 87 of the top 100 broadcasts last year were football. Illegal streaming is probably in that world. It's probably in the football world. So, when you watch Red Zone, you watch any game, there's this copyright notice they put before every broadcast. You guys have heard it before. This broadcast is copyrighted by NFL Productions for the use of our private audience. Any other use of this broadcast or any pictures, descriptions, or accounts of this game without the consent of the NFL Productions is prohibited. They say that for a reason. The NFL can, will they? I'm not sure, but they can prosecute you for those illegal streams. Yes, hosting, downloading, and streaming, the one that probably most of you do. Be very careful when you're out there. Don't be Danil Medvedev. Don't admit to crimes. Maybe hire a lawyer and he'll tell you not to do that. That has been Lust for Law this week. We have a great show. We have 2 special guests, and we will get into it when we come back. A very heavy NFL edition of Sports Bettor Court when we come back.
feel like this is a quietly contentious point in dynasty fantasy football, what it means to actually be rebuilding. Some people say you should never truly be rebuilding. How do you view the rebuilding versus competing dichotomy in dynasty?
So I will be the first person to acknowledge that my preferred format of fantasy football is just redraft. The years that I have played dynasty, it has been I've drafted a win now team because I've seen people that have just gotten into the cycle of rebuilding and thus they just don't make any progress. So if you're rebuilding for the 5th year in a row, I just, I don't know exactly how you get out of it, but yeah, it's definitely something that can happen. And a lot of people, especially when we come out of the NFL draft, everyone's just instantly shipping off, draft picks and everything. So, I mean, it's definitely something that can happen.
Joey, do you feel similarly to it? Do you feel like you see people getting stuck in the rebuilding loop?
I mean, I would say people that try to rebuild in the beginning of seasons, of their fantasy seasons, I see them get stuck in that rut. I would really try to only ever rebuild if I knew I was going to miss the playoffs. Like, I'm always trying to play to win, even if it's maybe I don't know.
I think my big thing is the word rebuild is a much shorter time frame than I think most people say it should be. Like, they look at rebuild as like 3 years out competing. Rebuild, you're looking to compete next season. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing it now, you're looking to revamp, and maybe there's a one season where you ship it off, but that very next season you should be competing. If you're doing it like that, I'm cool with it, but you got to have a plan, not just keep getting the young players, keep getting the draft picks. Otherwise, you end up like Tim. Maybe not like Tim who gets a bye, but you make the playoffs, you're in that like 4 to 6 range every year, just hovering in the middle. Nothing ever gets better, nothing ever gets worse.
I think I play like you in Dynasty, Simon. I play in 3-year windows.
100%. That's my go-to. And with the rate at which Dynasty leagues turn over, you should really only ever play in a 3-year window.
Sports Bettor Court is now in session. It's time for tonight's litigants. First, Adam Zdroik from RotoWire. Adam is RotoWire's soccer editor. Catch his betting, fantasy, and DFS content at RotoWire.com, as well as RotoWire's soccer YouTube channel. Find him on Twitter at RotoZdroik and at RotoWire Soccer. Next, Brian Rascona, host and producer at WFAN. Brian has been in the gambling industry for 18 years. Follow his plays weekly on Twitter at @B_Rascona. All rise for the Honorable Judge Dan Lust.
Welcome, litigants, to my courtroom. Thank you, Anthony. Put me in my judge seat right in the middle of this courtroom. Brian, Adam, pleasure to have you. Refresher for the rules for those coming in new. On Sports Bettor Court, we play best 2 out of 3. I give you 3 arguments. You give me an over, you give me an under. The winner is the one that best executes the argument. So, listen, I might not necessarily buy the over or the under, but if you can sell it persuasively, that's what we do as lawyers. Sometimes we have no idea what we're talking about. We're blowing a lot of hot smoke, but it's all about the argument here. If you don't have the facts on your side, you don't have the law on your side, sometimes, guys, you just got to bang the table. So banging is allowed, but if you disobey one of Judge Lust's orders, I'm going to hold you in contempt, and I'm going to throw you in jail. Just kidding. Not going to happen. Okay. Gentlemen, you follow the rules? You're with me so far?
Got it.
If you get out of line, Bailiff Anthony's going to throw you in prison. That's the voiceover guy. You're out.
Before I get going, this copyrighted telecast of the National Basketball Association may not be retransmitted, reproduced, or otherwise represented in any other form without the express written consent of the NBA.
There we go, Brian. Bonus points for my courtroom. Certainly bonus points.
I think it's cheating. I don't know.
NBA has it. Listen, he didn't win the round. He just got some favor. Right, Adam, you can get it back. Okay, so let's do this. We're going to start in the world of the NFL. Actually, all of our bets this week are going to be in the NFL world. I have some thoughts on this one. David Montgomery, newest addition to the Detroit Lions backfield. I won't say anything else, but that backfield's a very interesting one. One of the hottest teams in football. Everyone's picking the Lions. They have our first game on Thursday night. I like this one. I like this. David Montgomery rushing touchdowns over under 6.5. Adam, I'm going to give you the lead here. Give me an opening statement. Let's give you about 30 seconds or so on the clock. If you go long, I'll yank you out. But go ahead here.
The Lions had 23 rushing touchdowns last season. Jamal Williams is gone. David Montgomery's in. I know Jahmyr Gibbs is there, and that's kind of the talk of everything. But if you actually look at Jahmyr Gibbs' over-under in terms of rushing, it's only 625 yards. So not even the odds makers are projecting Gibbs to get a ton of rushes. So why is David Montgomery at 6.5 for the over-under when that was what he averaged with the Bears, who are projected to be a bottom 5 offense and have been for the last 4 years? Now everyone's projecting the Lions to be a top 5, top 10 offense. So are we sure about this number, 6.5?
You're saying a lot of smart things here. I like smart things in my courtroom. Brian, you like the under here, I'm guessing?
I do. I don't see it. I really don't. I can't see how David Montgomery is going to go over 6.5. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is, he's the talk of the town. Listen, this is what the Detroit Lions got rid of Jamal Williams for. They didn't get rid of him. They let him walk, which was a mistake anyway. The guy led the league in touchdowns, I believe. But they got to feature the guy that they're going to replace Jamal Williams for. They have to feature Gibbs in this offense in order to validate what they've done. So for me to sit here and say David Montgomery is going to go over 6.5 is blasphemy. It makes no sense to me. I see Jahmyr Gibbs getting the bulk of the carries most of the time. You want to sit here and talk about 600. How many yards was it in the over-under that they were saying?
625.
Yeah, you know what? Give me the over. Give me the over on that, and give me the over on the touchdowns. David Montgomery had a lot of time to prove himself in Chicago. He couldn't do it. He couldn't figure it out. I'm sorry. And you know what? None of the running backs have. You go back to Langford, who they touted off for a few weeks out of Alabama, and then he basically was gone after that.
Let me jump in here. This is an interesting question here, right? And I think I actually find this line to be very interesting. So I'm happy we addressed this here. Good job, Anthony, finding a very good line. Gentlemen, if we just look at what David Montgomery did with the Chicago Bears, and I think, Adam, you've laid it out well. Year 1 as a rookie, 2019, 6 touchdowns, then 8 touchdowns, then 7 touchdowns, then 5 touchdowns. So if you just look at what he did in a vacuum, right, 6.5 is probably a fair number if you remained a member of the Chicago Bears. But now as a member of the Detroit Lions, different story. Adam, did you give me the number? How many touchdowns did Jamal Williams have in 2022?
17.
Okay. Who is eating up those 17 touchdowns? I don't have this number. Maybe you guys have it. What is Jahmyr Gibbs' touchdown line for the season? I don't know the answer to this.
I cannot find it. I looked it up. I
just looked it up too. I couldn't find it. That's very interesting. Do we think the Detroit Lions are just going to lose those 23 touchdowns? If Montgomery's line is 6.5, and what's Gibbs' line? 10.5? It's definitely not. It's going to be closer to 6.5, 7.5. Who's going to eat up those touchdowns? Brian, you have the under here. Where are those touchdowns going to go?
I think they come from the receiving core. I think they're going to come from the receiving core. I think it's going to be a lot of Amara St. Brown. I think it's going to be. I know they lost Hawkinson, but I think it's going to come from the fact of the wide receivers, and I think it's going to come a lot. I'm sorry, they're going to feature Gibbs. You cannot sit here. Dan Campbell's not going to sit here and not feature a guy he took in the first round. It makes no sense.
Okay, so Brian, you're speaking to my heart here as someone that spent a lot of money in my auction on Jahmyr Gibbs. I have this exact thought. Same thought why Bijan Robinson is the number 2 running back in every draft. You got to take him. You got to invest in him. You let DeAndre Swift walk. You have to showcase this guy. Montgomery is old news. Gibbs is the new toy. So, Adam, I'll spin it to you. I mean, if we're going to invest in anyone in that backfield, maybe we should invest in Gibbs. And then, right, we've looked at what Montgomery did in the past. I don't know, 6, 8, 7, 5 last year. Right. And I'm just looking at the yards per carry. It's nothing so sexy. It's 3.7, 4.3, 3.8, 4.0. I mean, do we even know that Montgomery's going to keep that job the whole year? I don't know if we know that.
I don't think it's going to be Gibbs, though. They're just not going to give him all the between tackles, carries. They're gonna use him kind of like Swift last season. He's going to be a popular receiver. They're going to use him in all kinds of ways. They're not going to be like, okay, it's 3rd and 1, it's 2nd and 1. Even 1st and 10, whatever. They're just trying to be like, here, just go run through. They have a great offensive line, but I don't think that's going to be – they're going to want him fresh. I mean, there's already quotes that came out from their coaching staff today, even on Wednesday, about, okay, we gotta kind of limit what we're going to do here in these early games to get him up to speed and also keep him fresh for these 17 games.
I like this line a lot. Brian, I'm going to – well, you have something to add, but Judge Lust has the ability to conduct some research here. So I'll let you want to add, but then I have a research point I think you guys are going to like here.
Well, I want to say that obviously you look at the line, right? It's over 6.5 plus 105, under 6.5, 125. What is Vegas telling you?
Right. No.
They're telling you the odds are in favor of the fact that he's going to go under.
Yes,
because everyone is a bad bettor and they're betting the incorrect side.
Judge Lust, very important here, right? This is
Everyone is not a bad bettor.
If you just pick the favorites
No.
on these lines, we would know who would win every line. But it's about who can argue the point most effectively, most persuasively. Gentlemen, I told you I did some research here. Judge Lust can use the computer. You guys can't. You guys have to go off the noggin, but that's what the judges can do. Does anybody know how many touchdowns Jahmyr Gibbs had in 12 games and 151 attempts at Alabama last year? Can anybody give me that number?
I do not.
Over or under 9.5.
Under.
Brian, what do you think?
It's just rushing touchdowns.
The way he's presenting it and what he said, yes, I'm going to go under.
The number is 7.
Yeah.
926 rushing yards.
Right.
On the receiving end, he had 3 touchdowns. So it wasn't like he had these robust numbers. So
I can't compare Nick Saban's offense to the NFL. I just can't do it.
No,
Nick Saban runs all over NCAA football every year.
There's a point that's raised here, and I'm not sure. I have to render a ruling for this round. But as I'm looking at this, we have, I don't know what Gibbs's line is going to be. It's probably going to be something like 6.5. You have Montgomery at 6.5. And where are those other rushing touchdowns going? So I have my second fantasy draft tonight. Got to look towards that Lions backfield. I think we might have 2 overs here. And in rendering my decision for round 1, Adam, I'm going to give it to you. This is an odd line. Yes, 6.5 if David Montgomery was a member of the Chicago Bears. But he's got to get some increased juice as now a member of the Lions. Someone's got to eat up those touchdowns. Goff is still there. Amon-Ra St. Brown is still there. Got a lot of the same pieces. Reynolds is still there. I took him in my deep league. Marvin Jones is back. A lot of the same pieces with new running backs. I don't know. The number doesn't make sense. Adam, I'm going to give you round 1. But Brian, of all the rounds I've done thus far, that might be the closest round. And Your Honor might be investing in this line before the show is over, probably during the next break. Okay, let's pause right here. In the midst of fantasy season, we are about to start fantasy season, but also sports betting season. FanDuel, up to $2,500, no sweat first bet by using the promo code fantasyalarm.com/FanDuel. I'm excited for season. I am a slave to the teasers. I'm a slave to the high money line parlays, but don't listen to me. I'm not your judge for betting advice. We listen to Brian and we listen to Adam. Now, for betting, case number 2. Brian, this is not over. In the history of the show, I say best 2 out of 3. Sometimes / all of the time, the one that loses round 1 usually wins round 2. But listen, maybe not this time. I don't know. Maybe you'll break the curse here.
I'll do my best.
Or the luck of the draw. New Orleans Saints win total is 9.5 this year. People are looking at the schedule, which I'm hoping you guys will shed some light on. They say this is a baked-in schedule win. So we've actually covered this line on the show before, but it's all about who makes the best argument. Brian, I'll leave it to you. I'm convinced by the schedule, but it's also a team that did not win 10 games last year. So, Brian, I'm going to have you start here. What do you like? You like the over or you like the under?
I love the over. I love the over in the Saints. I think it's the bet of the year as far as the futures go, predominantly because of the schedule. Also, they have their quarterback in Derek Carr. They put all their eggs in this basket with Derek Carr. Their weapons are still there. They bring back Michael Thomas. We'll see how he does. Key component on them going over this year. But you look at the schedule. They start off at home against the Titans. They're at the Panthers. The division itself is garbage. Todd Bowles, I'm sorry, terrible head coach. He couldn't move the football with Tom Brady last year. What makes you think he's going to move the football with Baker Mayfield? I don't see that happening. His defense will always be good. That's a Todd Bowles, staple. And then week 3, now this game is going to be pivotal. Week 3, I think the Packers are going to be better than most people think. They're at Green Bay. That'll be a pivotal game week 3 for them. But then they're home against the Bucs. I just told you how bad the Bucs are. They're at Patriots. I'm not sold on the Patriots. I think they're regressing tremendously. I think Bill Belichick's arrogance now is getting the best of him. I think he's trying to think that he can do a lot more with less. I think it's getting the best of him now because I think this team is going to be bad. I think the Patriot team is going to be terrible.
Well, without going game by game, though, you feel confident in the schedule? You think it's a weak schedule?
I do. They don't have a challenge until they're at the Jags come week 7, in my mind. Then they're at Houston week 6.
6-0 heading into week 7.
They could be 5-1. I think that Packer game could be a little dicey for them. Up in Green Bay, Saints, just aesthetically, the Saints up in Green Bay is not a good look, and I don't like that game at all. So, but I do think the Saints going over 9.5 is tremendous. I think it's tremendous.
I like it. Adam, you're going to have an uphill battle here because I like this line, and just a full disclosure.
And Dennis Allen reunited with Derek Carr.
The judge is invested in 9.5. So listen, if you could convince me otherwise, maybe I'm hedging my bets. I'll take some unders. But Adam, you got a tough uphill battle here. You like the under 9.5? You like it?
This is a bet on what team you don't hate in the NFC South, and everyone is coming to the same conclusion. I mean, Brian just went through it. The Bucks are terrible, Falcons are terrible, Panthers are terrible. So, okay, I'm going to go with the Saints. All these teams have it has an easy schedule. But you also mentioned Todd Bowles, and do we not care about Dennis Allen here? 7-10 last season, 4-win seasons with the Raiders a while back when he was there. I mean, how much confidence is there in this head coach who just doesn't have much success at all? Derek Carr's there, but what does that mean? If we look back at last season's schedule, Derek Carr actually got shut out against this Saints team. I looked at the numbers for that. He had like 100 yards in it.
Good research, Adam.
Not very good. I mean, okay, Derek Carr, great. He's there. What does this mean? I just think this is a bet on a team that you don't hate in this division, and everyone's going to the Saints, but I think it's going to be the division winner. I think is going to have 8 or 9 wins because it's going to be one of those divisions where none of the teams are good. Someone has to win it, and it's going to be at 9 wins.
I'll jump in here. Listen, as lawyers, we look at precedent. We look back. This time last year, can anybody tell me who the schedule darling was? Does anyone remember? The Philadelphia Eagles were the schedule darling. Everyone said, the Eagles have this great schedule. They're going to go all the way. And then, schmoes like me are like, no, the Eagles aren't that good. Hurts isn't going to do much. And he had a shitty year. Oh, shouldn't curse in the show. But, listen, the judge can do what he wants in the court. We're looking at a team that last year, let's just call a spade a spade. The team last year won 7 games. They won 7-10. Do they have an improvement at quarterback? Sure. Andy Dalton, Derek Carr, he can certainly convince us. Jameis Winston the year before. This is a team that won 9 games under Jameis Winston in 2021, won 7 games with Dalton in 2022. So do they have an improvement at quarterback? Sure. Is it the line's 9.5. Is it a 3-win improvement from the team the year before with Alvin Kamara missing 3 games? I'm not really sure of that. Michael Thomas, yes, playing a little bit more, but we'll see how long he stays on the field. Yes, people are looking at the Eagles, and that's why this number is juiced up. If you didn't know the schedule and you were just looking at this team on paper, I don't think you would call this a 9.5 win team. I think you'd probably call it a 7.5 win team, 8.5 win team. On paper, are they that much better than the New England Patriots? I know, Brian, you're down on the Patriots, it seems like, but New England Patriots are a 7.5 win team. At a certain point, we have to look at what the team is. I mean, has Carr, do we trust Carr in a new division, a new system, with wide receivers he's never been with, coming off of the worst year of his career? I think that's the part of it. So, Brian, I'll go back to you here. Do you believe Carr on the Saints? Do you believe he'll have a bounce back year? I think that's a lot of this question.
Well, I think that's the question right there. I mean, the most important position in the NFL is the quarterback. I do believe in Carr. I do believe he's going to come back. And listen, is he going to have a year like he had in 2016 where he's potential MVP before he got hurt? That I don't know. But I think it's more of the fact of the division they're in. Desmond Ridder at the helm in Atlanta. No, thank you. Like I said, Baker Mayfield, we've seen this already. And we've seen the Todd Bowles up here in New York. We've seen the whole Todd Bowles regime with the Jets. I'm not sold on them either. You have Frank Reich and Bryce Young over in Carolina. They're going to look to start figuring things out themselves. I'm not sold on the rest of the division. You have 6 games against the division, right? I only mentioned in the schedule 2 of those games. I do think you find 10 wins out of this Saints team. I do. I believe it.
And normally we go back and forth, but I'm going to shut this down. Brian, I'm personally invested in this bet. I have the over 9.5. Adam, nice job. I don't know if your heart was in it. I feel like you just gave up. You just were coasting after your round 1 win. Ryan, the winner of round 2, will come back for the rubber match after this.
I feel like this is a quietly contentious point in Dynasty Fantasy Football, what it means to actually be rebuilding. Some people say you should never truly be rebuilding. How do you view the rebuilding versus competing dichotomy in Dynasty?
So I will be the first person to acknowledge that my preferred format of fantasy football is just redraft. The years that I have played Dynasty, it has been I've drafted a win now team because I've seen people that have just gotten into the cycle of rebuilding and thus they just don't make any progress. So if you're rebuilding for the 5th year in a row, I just, I don't know exactly how you get out of it, but yeah, it's definitely something that can happen. And a lot of people, especially when we come out of the NFL draft, everyone's just instantly shipping off, draft picks and everything. So, I mean, it's definitely something that can happen.
Joey, do you feel similarly to it? Do you feel like you see people getting stuck in the rebuilding loop?
I mean, I would say people that try to rebuild in the beginning of seasons, of their fantasy seasons, I see them get stuck in that rut. I would really try to only ever rebuild if I knew I was going to miss the playoffs. Like, I'm always trying to play to win, even if it's maybe I don't know.
I think my big thing is the word rebuild is a much shorter time frame than I think most people say it should be. Like, they look at rebuild as like 3 years out competing. Rebuild, you're looking to compete next season. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing it now, you're looking to revamp, and maybe there's a one season where you ship it off, but that very next season you should be competing. If you're doing it like that, I'm cool with it, but you gotta have a plan, not just keep getting the young players, keep getting the draft picks. Otherwise, you end up like Tim. Maybe not like Tim who gets a bye, but you make the playoffs, you're in that like 4 to 6 range every year, just hovering in the middle. Nothing ever gets better, nothing ever gets worse.
I think I play like you in Dynasty, Simon. I play in 3-year windows.
100%. That's my go-to. And with the rate at which Dynasty leagues turn over, you should really only ever play in a 3-year window.
All rise for Sports Bettor Court with Dan Lust on Bettor Sports Network.
We are back. The rubber match, 1-1. This is my favorite part of the show, where I get to pick the bet. Before we do that, a little bit of business. Fantasy Alarms All-Pro subscription. Start a free 7-day trial of Fantasy Alarms All-Pro subscription and get the Fantasy Football Draft Guide and cheat sheet for free. Go to fantasyalarm.com/draft. We're on the eve of draft season. I would hope that you guys are using Fantasy Alarm at this point after all these fun messages from our sponsor over at Fantasy Alarm. Okay. We talk about things that Judge Lust might be invested in. I've disclosed that I was invested in the Saints over. So listen, you guys make some bets. Sometimes I'm invested. I have a lot of lines out here. I'm heavily invested. This is a line that I have looked at, I have studied, and I have not made a decision on. So we're going to give a wild card here. The winner of this bet doesn't just win the show; they win the best bet of the week. Okay, so this is it. This is the parlay here. So doesn't matter round one, round two. This is everything right here. Okay, Tua. I did my monologue last week on Tua suffering concussions. That said, right, if you just look at fantasy Tua, a lot of people are buying the hype here. And we can get into the facts and the game-by-game log. I think this line is so fascinating. 3,900 passing yards or 3,900 and a half passing yards. So, Brian, Adam, I'm going to I'll let whoever goes first pick the line. The other one's got to go the opposite direction. Brian, let's go with you. You won round 2. What do you like here? The over or the under on Tua passing yards for the season? I love
this.
This
is tough. This is like gut-wrenching right here because, last year he threw for almost 3,600 yards and he had a concussion problem during that whole season. So you're talking literally one game, right? I mean, he could throw for 300 yards in one game and get over that 3,900. Here's the question. This is what you got to ask yourself if you're a gambler right here with Tua and this line. Is he going to stay healthy? I mean, I'm not breaking ground here. I'm not discovering plutonium here when I say this. Is he going to stay healthy? And that's what you're asking me. From what I've seen, and it's been a small sample size, I'm going to say that he's not going to stay healthy. I'm going to say he's not going to go over the 3,900 yards. He doesn't have the running back help either. I mean, how many times we got to see Raheem Mostert on that team? He does have the wide receiver help in Jalen Waddle. He's got Tyreek Hill. He's got Braxton Berrios now, came over from the Jets. He's got weapons out there. The question is, and listen, again, we're just repeating everyone else. Is he going to stay healthy? I'm saying he's not. I'm not, from what I've seen, it seems like he's got the Al-Toon syndrome and he's not going to stay healthy. I have to take the under just based on what I've seen and facts, even though he almost threw for 3,600 yards last year.
You know who else has those weapons? Mike White has the same weapons. Okay.
Well,
Adam.
it's funny. I was just going to say, you might have a better chance of getting Mike White over 3,900 yards than you do Tua.
Adam, go ahead here. I've not made up my mind on this. I'm watching this one very closely.
Yeah, this is I think the general public kind of thinks that it's kind of here with Brian, just going with the under because is this guy going to stay healthy? If he gets hit the wrong way once, that could be it for his career kind of a thing. And I was actually surprised that the number was 3,900, but I mean, sports books just can't get screwed for having a number that's too low for someone that averaged 270 yards per game. But, I looked some stuff up on Tua. He's telling people he spent all off season planning to play 17 games. He's working as hard as he can. That's what he did all off season to make it 17 games. That's what he did. That's all he
put
cared
on
about.
some weight. He gained about 10 pounds.
Exactly.
He's doing jiu-jitsu. I read the same reports. I follow.
He came into the league with injury problems. He's had some injury problems, but
a lot of injury problems.
Now you know, maybe he's more serious about it. Maybe he's more serious about it, putting some more muscle on him. And we also have to mention the second year under Mike McDaniel. I mean, everyone was talking about Mike McDaniel last season for, you know, those massive games that Tua had. Now it's another offseason with him. Now it's another season with him. So I think that also will help. And then you still have the speedy wide receivers. So, I mean, at the end of the day, if he plays 17 games, he'll be near 5,000 yards. So this is a bet on him being healthy.
I'm with you. Okay. So Judge Lust did his research here, independent of the show, just as a bettor over here. And, you know, listen, the public sometimes is right? We can fade the public all we want. Sometimes the public is right. As a rookie in 2020, Tua played 10 games. As a sophomore player in 2021, played 13 games, and last year played 13 games. Last year were the concussions. The years before were not really the concussions. So he's not played more than 13 games in a year. Now, people say his performance might be inhibited by the concussions. He had those, and I talked about in the show last week, he had those, you know, alleged concussions. We're not sure if he suffered one between week 3 and week 4 last year, okay? So he doesn't play week 5. He doesn't play week 6. He comes back week 7. So from week 7 to week 15, he played in 8 consecutive games, and then third concussion, he doesn't play week 16, 17, okay? In that 7-week stretch after the first 2 concussions, we'll put him in quotes because there's some dispute here, he averaged 270 yards a game, okay? And that's why, Adam, I know you did your research. That's the number, 270 yards per game. You're just doing basic math. If you think he's going to average 270 yards a game, which he has done post-concussion, that factors in that he's going to play, drum roll please, 13 games for the 3rd consecutive year. That's the bet. So do we think that Tua will miss 4 games on the season? That's the question. If you play all 17 games, you just have to average 220 yards. So Tua is a better player than that. The question is those 4 extra games. Brian, I'll go back to you here. This is a make or break year from Tua from a contractual standpoint. Is there any reason that, you know, maybe the Dolphins are looking at Mike White? Maybe they say, we don't want to invest. Maybe Tua is healthy this year, but the guy's already suffered 3 concussions, maybe more from youth. Maybe we don't want to let him play all 17 games. That's my question for you, Brian.
100%. I think that's a valid point out of you. I think 100% there's somewhat of a similar to what's going on down in Dallas where they picked up Trey Lance. And I think that it's similar to the fact that they're trying to have a backup plan for if Tua can't stay healthy, has concussion problems, or underperforms. And I think they had firsthand sight of Mike White. They seen him in the division, see what he could do.
Looks pretty good.
Looked pretty good. I mean, up here in New York, we were clamoring for him on WFAN. I was on air saying we should start Mike White. And I think that 100% that is the case. I think there is some people, and there's a lot of New York contingency down there in Florida that think Mike White could start.
They did say that about Bailey Zappi too, and then they kind of gave him the boot. So let's not put any stock into the AFC East show last year. Adam, I'm going to give you the final word here, and then I'm going to render the ruling for the winner of the show and best bet of the week. Go ahead, Adam.
I mean, if your argument is talking about Mike White taking his spot, then I don't know if I have to say anything else. I mean, are Dolphins fans really want Mike White? Is that what they want their season to come to? I don't think so. They know that Tua is their path to the playoffs, to any chance in the playoffs. Mike White is not going to lead them anywhere. So bet on Tua, bet on this over. 5,000 yards for Tua, 30+ touchdowns. Grab him on your fantasy team. Why not? Go all in.
See, you're saying, if you're saying that, you're saying the Dolphins are making the playoffs. They're going to the playoffs.
I don't know.
If he's throwing for 5,000 yards.
Hey, everyone's taking, Waddle and Tyreek early in drafts. So why it's got to be Tua. It's got to be the quarterback as well. He's got to be.
Gentlemen, I'll pop in here. Okay. I think I'm ready to render my verdict both. And I will say, and Anthony, my producer extraordinaire, can attest this, I think you two were our top litigants performing against one another. You brought each other up, just like Mike White is going to rise Tua up, right? This is more of a question, and I think you have to think about it from the business standpoint, right? The Cardinals went into bed with Kyler Murray. I think they're trying to get out from that deal. They're locked into that long-term. The franchise is going in a different direction. Did you want to invest that money long-term in Kyler Murray? Probably not, right? This is a make-or-break year for Tua, and if he has any signs of an injury, Dolphins have to be wary, right? I think this is his contract year. It's just his contract year performance. He's looking around the league. People are getting these huge deals. Russell Wilson, another huge deal. The Denver Broncos are in bed with him. Do they want that? I think the first sign of an injury Coach McDaniel's got to look in the mirror and say, do we really believe in this guy Tua long term? Right? Mike White was brought in, a very high profile backup. I'm not sure, right? So I don't think any of us can sit here and Nostradamus and predict the future. But if we just look 3 years into Tua's career, it's not the concussions. It's just the general ability to stay on the field. 10, 13, and 13. And let's not forget, back at Alabama, he had injury issues too. I think if we're going to bet, is Tua going to play a full season? I don't think you can bet that. And I think that's why the line factors it in. Brian, I'm going with you. And very dangerous here. I'm investing my money. Judge lost money into the Tua under bet. Brian comes from behind, takes the win, and the best bet of the week. Gentlemen, this is dangerous. But listen, our losers don't go home empty-handed. Not the best bet of the week, but the David Montgomery 6.5 line, I'm going to also bet that too. So it's not the best bet of the week, but you guys are both on the hook if Judge lost gets in trouble or is streaming anything illegally. I'm not going to host anything, but people stream stuff. Gentlemen, thank you very much. You guys were both excellent. That'll do it for us on Sports Bettor Court. And stay tuned for Lisa Ann Does Fantasy Better with Lisa Ann and Howard Bender from 7 to 9 tonight. So stay here, quick break. But gentlemen, excellent job. And
thanks for having me.
See you next week.
Thanks, Dan.
Week 1. See you guys.
See ya.
Sports Bettor Court is now says. Join us next week, Wednesday at 6 p.m., where we weigh the odds and settle the score with the Honorable Judge Dan Lust.